Bo Nickal is not the truth. I've been watching this sport since 2009, and you get to see a lot of fighters come and go. You get to see a lot of hype trains either make it to the station or get derailed. And I think against, what's that guy's name? DeRitter from 1FC, the former 1FC champion, I believe he beats Bo Nickal. The reason why I believe that is because Bo Nickal is someone who doesn't have much experience in the sport. He acknowledges that, and he embraces a slow start. He kind of likes being handheld by the UFC matchmakers and brought along slowly. A lot of you new fans don't know this, but back in the day, there wasn't much of that. People weren't, getting that kind of preferential treatment just because the matchmakers in the UFC saw potential in you. Everybody has potential because you're in the UFC and it's the highest caliber of the sport, and hey, you're here for a reason. So what the UFC used to do is just throw you to the wolves. Bo Nickal's first fight might be against someone, that you've heard of before, or someone that you've heard of before that's actually a contender, someone who Bo Nickal's supposed to be. I'll give you an example. When you give Bo Nickal a guy like Paul Craig, and Bo Nickal ends up being like a plus, what was he, a plus 1,000 or maybe even more. It might have been like plus 1,200 or more of a favorite. He was a plus 1,200 or more favorite against Paul Craig, and that's because of all the hype behind him. This is a guy who apparently could make a wrestling world team today. This is a guy who could be an Olympian. People say like, oh, he chose MMA over the Olympics and over world wrestling and things like that. Okay, but I haven't seen the dominance. I haven't seen what's so special. A guy like Paul Craig, when he goes up against Bo Nickal, he's supposed to get steamrolled. The same way how Khamzat Chimaev steamrolls people, that's how he's supposed to get steamrolled. And I'll be honest with you, Madison Square Garden, John Jones card, biggest card of the year, president or president-elect Trump is in the building right there, front row, and you go out there and you do that with Paul Craig. I think Bo Nickal should have went out there on some Khamzat Chimaev type of time and just squeezed on anything he could get and break something, do something, just be vicious and get a finish. But not that pitter-patter, I'm going to show off my striking in this fight when nobody expects you to be a striker. Nobody wants to see your striking. Like, just give us what you're good at, bro. Like, why are you trying to be something that you're not? You know what I mean? Like, you're a wrestler. Go out there and show how good your wrestling is. And another thing, I do not want to hear from Bo Nickal, this guy who's supposed to have the best wrestling in the UFC. Is he the best? I've actually heard people say this. Is he the best wrestler on paper that the UFC has ever had on their roster? Things like that. And it's like, dude, he's scared to go to the ground with Paul Craig. The floor is lava when he's going up against Paul Craig. He has no interest in it at all. You can't sell me on that anymore. You can't sell me on the idea that this guy's the best wrestler in the business when he's reluctant and apprehensive to take down Paul Craig. Credit to Paul Craig, but there's levels to this game, and the level that people are saying Bo Nickal is on, if he really was on that level, he would have finished Paul Craig, and that's a fact. Bo Nickal also lacks killer instinct. He kind of is more of a sportsman than he is a fighter. And what do I mean by that? I just mean I haven't seen him in a predicament yet where when it gets crazy, when maybe he's got a cut over his eye, he's got a hematoma going, something, it's getting crazy. It's a fight. Maybe your legs turned into spaghetti for the first time. I have yet to see him react to these things. I've yet to see how he deals with it because I'll be honest, what I saw from Paul Craig, I watched the fight multiple times. What I saw from that fight, I saw a guy who froze when he had the guy hurt. He had Paul Craig hurt. Paul Craig then cracked him back with a shot because his back was against the fence. And Bo Nickal kind of just stood there tentative, like he didn't want to get hit again. He didn't want to, like, he didn't go for a takedown after he heard it. He didn't do nothing. He just let him off the hook, and Paul Craig was able to survive. Well, guess what? If you do that to guys who are better than Paul Craig, if you let Robert Whitaker off the hook, if you let Dricus du Plessis, Sean Strickland, Jared Cannonier, Paulo Costa, if you let these guys off the hook, you're in trouble. You know what I mean? Like, again, there's levels to it. Credit to Paul Craig, respect to Paul Craig. But, guys, there's levels to this game. And I really did not like what I see from that performance. And based off that performance, and how Bo Nickal handled the criticism from that performance, he kind of just brushed it off and ignored it. He kind of labeled it all as just a bunch of fans that are couch potatoes and don't know what they're talking about. And hey, listen, if that's what you want to call someone like myself, albeit, but I think you're cutting your nose to spite your face, because at the end of the day, I've been watching this sport longer than Bo Nickal has. You know, I've been watching this sport since 2009. Heavily watching the sport. I've seen, I believe I've watched more MMA than Bo Nickal has, and that's just what it is. I'm not a world level wrestler, right? He had to dedicate all his time to that. That's what he had to do. So we all have our own thing. Just because I'm not, Mr. in shape and in sport and getting my hand raised alongside Bo Nickal, don't mean I don't get to have an opinion. You know what I mean? Look at this guy right here, Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's got an opinion. He don't fight in the octagon. So I think that's a cheap cop-out whenever fighters do that. Whenever fighters try to be like, oh, it's just like they brush aside criticism like it's just fan hatred. It's not. I have no reason to hate Bo Nickal. I just call it how I see it. And if you're going to be the guy, if that's who you're proclaiming to be, I mean, Bo Nickal's someone who was calling out Khamzat Chimaev. Just recently, he was calling him out again. Bro, I hate to break it to you, but did you see what Khamzat Chimaev did to Robert Whitaker? Did you see that? That is what you do if you're him, if you're the guy, if you're he's up next. You know what I'm saying? Undeniable. That's what you do. Not what Bo Nickal did against Paul Craig. What? I think the UFC is taking their time with Bo Nickal. He's said as much himself, and he's even happy about it. But, I kind of wish they would let go of his hand, stop holding his hand, stop spoon-feeding him, and let's see if he can walk. And I think we're going to get a glimpse into that against DeRider, Rainer, whatever. Former champion 1FC, mentioned him earlier in the video. I think he has been in those situations. He's lost before, right? He learned a lesson from losses, which is tremendous experience in itself. Bo Nickal's never even lost inside MMA. We don't know how Bo Nickal's going to respond to his first loss, right? We may never see Bo Nickal again after his first loss, depending on how he loses. We don't know. So again, DeRider on the other side, he's a former champion. He's a former 1FC champion. To me, that's a feather in the cap. That's respect. That's a salute. That's a bow down. You know what I mean? Like that's an achievement right there. What does Bo Nickal have? Other than just being someone who, a bunch of people are hyping up. Exactly. So I think I'm leaning towards DeRider. I'll certainly know how to pronounce his name if after the fight, regardless. But certainly if he'll get his hand raised over Bo Nickal, I mean, you gotta know his name at that point. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got on this one. I'm very much looking forward to this. Bo Nickal is one of the bigger stars in the sport, one of the bigger names in the sport. It's someone who people are having their eye on and things like that. And I've seen him. I think he sees this stuff. I'm not sure if he's ever seen one of my videos. Maybe he will eventually. In fact, I'm sure he will eventually. But it's very interesting stuff. I don't like his response to criticism. And we're going to see. We're going to see if he proves me wrong or if I end up being right. Only time will tell. But let me know what you think in the comment section below, whether you agree or disagree. It does not matter. Just join the discussion. Follow for more. And, of course, thank you, because you are all appreciated.